trade deadline looms, will the Snakes finally find a solution to their pitching woes ahead of a crucial series in Toronto? Find out right now on the T-Backs podcast.
Perdomo makes the play.
And a high fly ball. No doubt about this. Home run Marte.
They're going to send them all the way around. Corbin Carroll with an inside the park answer back.
I'm Ivan Melendez.
Luis Gonzalez.
I'm Tori Lavello, and you're listening to the T-Backs podcast.
T-Backs podcast.
T-Backs podcast.
Arizona's #1 baseball and beverage podcast.
Hello everybody and welcome back at last to the T-Backs podcast, returning from hiatus after 2 weeks of sun-drenched, glorious in-person baseball. We're back and nothing's changed. We're still bringing you all the hottest Arizona Diamondbacks tea and talk, and are still proud to be Arizona's #1 baseball and beverage podcast. Loads of stuff has happened since the last episode. Diamondbacks swept the Braves, then got swept by the Reds, then swept the Mariners, and now off the back of a Homestead Series win against close division rivals, the San Diego Padres, we're off to Toronto to take on the Blue Jays. But that's not really the headline this week. As I sit here drinking my tea, most people's eyes, if they aren't all on the All-Star vote, by the way, go on and vote for all of the Diamondbacks, because why on earth are Eugenio Suarez and Geraldo Perdomo not making the next round of voting? Instead, our attention is on the upcoming trade deadline. And there's some news on that front to open up the episode, and that is that D-backs GM Mike Hazen has come out, given an interview, and he has stomped down on the rumors that will be big sellers this trade window. We already know, if you've been reading the news and not living under a rock, that there has been interest in Merrill Kelly from the Cubs and the Astros. The Mariners and the Yankees are sniffing at Eugenio Suarez, and Josh Naylor has been the subject of several reported calls to the front office as well. But if we take Hazen at his word, we'll be acquiring and buying as our main trend. So the real question is, what do the Diamondbacks need? It's a pretty stupid question because the obvious answer is pitching, mostly in relief, especially in high leverage situations. But all round, the bullpen needs work. We are undoubtedly the worst bullpen in baseball. Statistically, we're the worst bullpen in baseball by ERA this year. We're pretty close to having the most number of blown saves, and despite the arrival of Anthony DeSclafani after the veteran pitcher opted out of a minor league deal with the Yankees, more arms are needed because the injury list is chock full of pitchers at this point. Christian Montes de Oca, Justin Martinez, AJ Puck, Christian Maynard, Kendall Graveman, Blake Walston, and Tommy Henry are all well-used bullpen arms currently on the IL. Pretty sure I might still be missing somebody from that list. But that leaves Kevin Ginkel, Shelby Miller, or Ryan Thompson as the best option when it comes to late inning arms in the pen. Now, Shelby Miller has been the guy who's been the go-to closer, lacking J Mart for the most part this year. So far, he's got 29 games, 3 wins, 1 loss, 7 saves, and an ERA of 1.57, which is not to be sniffed at by any stretch of the imagination. But 1, he's not a closer by trade, and 2, while he may have the stuff, he's had some pretty high-profile blown saves and losses this year. So with J-Mar out for the stretch and the rest of the year, thankfully it's not Tommy John, it's elbow brace reconstruction or whatever, but I think we do need to reopen the closer conversation. Let's get into it. Enter Felix Bautista. Most of you guys will know who that is. He's a 2023 All-Star, he's a closer, and he plays for the Orioles. And this year, he's had a rougher time than perhaps expected. He's got an ERA of 3.04 in 24 games and 14 saves with an 0-1 record. This, at least in my eyes, means that he might be on the list a fair bit cheaper than his reputation might warrant. The Orioles right now, I think, are looking for a reason to be buyers. They've had a slow start to the year. They're 29-40 and are 6.5 games back from a wildcard spot. So while they might be looking for a reason to be buyers, realistically, I don't think they will be. They're probably going to be looking to move some contracts on. They've got several rental pieces who I imagine will be on the block. That includes both Zach Eflin, who I saw pitch pretty effectively against the Mariners in Seattle at the tail end of last week, and also Japanese arm Tomoyuki Sugano, who, I'm pretty sure, despite being what we'd call probably a veteran pitcher, is eligible for Rookie of the Year this year, and both of those guys I'd very happily take on the Diamondbacks. But Bautista, to me, represents somebody with the kind of presence that I'd like to see given the rock in the ninth, especially on a team with a bullpen that's terrified of throwing baseballs and have a lot more save situations than he's currently seeing over at the Orioles. The real question is, how do we go about and get him? I think we might have to convince the Orioles GM that a rebuild is in order for them instead of what in all likelihood would be an improbable push to the postseason. So I think some pretty solid prospects might just have to go the other way. The O's did recently just acquire Kyle Tyler for some pitching depth off of waivers, but a little more on that end might go down pretty well for them, especially if they're going to also lose first baseman or outfielder Ryan O'Hearn as well. I see something like a straight swap in terms of arms for somebody like Gilbert Diaz and Roman Angelo, and then give them, somebody like Pavin Smith to replace Ryan O'Hearn as well. That's an attractive package because Pavin Smith, first baseman / outfielder / DH, represents pretty much everything O'Hearn does, just maybe not quite as good, but also represents somebody who we know definitely has untapped potential. Yes, he's 29, so we can't really consider him a prospect. The Diamondbacks have been waiting for him to come good for years, but it's there. It's just under the surface, and it's not quite come out yet, despite the fact that, this year has been my year of being big on Pavin, being supportive of him. We still haven't quite reached the heights that I think the Diamondbacks thought he might do when they took him as the 7th pick of the first round way back when. So nobody tell the Orioles that's what's going on with Pavin if he is in a bit of a slump. Let's go and use him as one of the big candidates alongside Gilbert Diaz, who of course is MLB blooded already, and see if we can get somebody like Felix Bautista for on a 1, maybe a 2-year deal, just to be that solution, at least for this last big push year that we're going to have this year. We need a closer, and I think he represents one of the best options. It might seem a little bit of a one-sided trade if we go and suddenly we've got Bautista from years past rather than Bautista as he has been this year. But hey, if the Giants can go and get Rafi Devers whilst only giving up a few prospects and Harrison as the main chunk of the deal, then, anything's possible. Players clearly want to come to the NL West, so that's exactly what we're going to exploit, and I'm going to keep exploiting that theory in my next trade proposal. I already know what some people are going to say, and yes, I know it's another veteran starter, and we don't want to be the Arizona retirement pen, but we've had a mixed bag when it comes to signing them. I'll admit that, especially when we're going to still pay a few $1 million to Madison Bumgarner this year, and he's a player who hasn't appeared in a Snakes uniform since the latter half of 2022 and early 2023 spring training. But I want to go and get a player who this year is 1.7 wins above replacement with a 2.7 starting ERA and no significant injury since 2020, and that player is Chris Sale. The Braves' big lefty has been a bright spot in a dull year for Atlanta. He's subject already to a big rumor involving 3 top Yankees prospects going the other way, so clearly Atlanta understand it's rebuild time for them. Despite getting Ronald Acuna Jr. back from injury, they've had a shocking start to the year. I personally, though, think we can offer Atlanta more than just an underperforming top prospect. They've talked about Spencer Jones here over at the Yankees, who I did talk about as potentially part of a trade package for Zach Gallen going the other way, and I'll still be interested to see what happens there. But he's hitting .239 in AAA at age 24, which is not quite the next Aaron Judge kind of numbers you might expect. Now, the Braves need 3 things, probably, looking at their roster on their rebuild. Number 1, a solid hitting catcher, as they're really missing some power in that position. A shortstop option to challenge an underperforming Ozzie Albies, and a DH to replace the aging Marcell Ozuna. And I can think of one guy tearing up AAA that ticks 2 of those boxes. Before you all yell at me, yes, I do understand that Jordan Lawler commands a hefty amount of value, and maybe trading him undermines us a little next year if we're going to lose Eugenio Suarez to free agency, given that Lawler might be the third base option going into the spring. Giving up that longevity for 1, maybe 2 years of Chris Sale isn't a call to be made lightly, but Lawler perhaps is earning a bit of a reputation for not performing as he should in Arizona, and the fans are starting to get on the back of him the more and more we wait for him to come up to the majors and actually do something. So maybe it's best for him and for us if he gets a fresh start elsewhere. And with the Braves not being a direct division rival, it limits the damage he might cause us if we let him go and rake somewhere else. Throw in a relief guy like Tyler Scott or Roman Angelo as another one for the future could yield enough pull to get the Braves to bite, and get the Snakes a calming veteran presence in the starting rotation and while we do it. And this is a starting rotation that, while stacked with talent, has lost an ace in Corbin Burns to season-ending Tommy John, and is braced to lose another in either Zach Gallen or Merrill Kelly at the start of the year. So supplementing what could be a rotation relying on youth next year with somebody like Sale, who is an experienced lefty arm not to be shrugged at on its own, could go a long way in stabilizing 2025 and keeping 2026 from being a ground-up rebuild should the Snakes, God forbid, fall short this year. Now, in my eyes, the Snakes need one more thing, and that is consistency in the offense. With the DH rotating between a number of infielders, which includes Eugenio Suarez and Josh Naylor and Ketel Marte, and then the likes of Pavin Smith, Randall Grichuk, and Tim Tower, and none of them quite getting the job done in that spot. I think maybe in that case a little shuffle is required too. We have incredible centre field talent in Jake McCarthy, who is perhaps harshly looking set to spend the whole year in AAA. I think maybe he could be turned in for some value. And one team that could use an MLB standard centre fielder is the Angels, who have some solid veterans who might come unstuck for the right package. Taylor Ward leads the team in homers and is an aforementioned veteran. And while DH Jorge Soler might not be an option, seeing as they only arrived this past offseason, first baseman Nolan Shanwell is batting .285 with a .775 OPS. Both of those represent an upgrade from Pavin's numbers at DH. So if him and Rake and Jake went out the door, I'd take either Ward or Shanwell plus an arm in return. Now, you could get any number of arms from the Angels. They're big on pitching prospects if you look in their system. But before we get into prospects, I'd always have a look at Kenley Jansen, who we did mention at the start of the year as a closer candidate. But yeah, when it comes to prospects, somebody like Caden Dana, who's an already MLB-blooded pitcher, who's probably more of a starting pitcher at this point, he'd be hard to ignore on quality alone. Let's not forget that somebody like Randall Grichuk is also in the last year of their deal. So a future third baseman who can also DH is just as important in terms of getting an impact in the team right now and for the future. So for this last candidate, I'd say let's go a little bit crazy. I'd very much love to have the conversation with Cincinnati about acquiring Gavin Lux, but if we're keeping it over at the Reds, I'm setting my sights instead on Edwin Arroyo, who's their number 3 and MLB's number 55 prospect. In case you don't know much about him, he's a natural switch hitter currently at AA Chattanooga, batting .276 with a .685 OPS. And he's making steady progress. He's progressed through the levels really well. Similar to Jordan Lawler, he can play between short and third, but unlike Lawler, he can see a fastball as well as off-speed stuff, and is expected to be ready a while before the D-backs' current infield crop below Lawler of Demetrio Cristantes, Lou James Groove, and Tommy Troy. Alongside him from Cincinnati, I would also take Taylor Rogers from the bullpen. Currently sits at a 2.82 ERA, but would provide an alternative lefty option alongside Jalen Beeks with a very different kind of pitching style, so could kind of take the weight off that lefty-righty matchup off of Jalen Beeks, who, let's be honest, has been pretty good this year. And in exchange, I'd be offering the Reds any one of Grichuk, McCarthy, or perhaps Alec Thomas. The Reds' outfield is absolutely chock full of platoon bats, and they are desperately in need of some better everyday starters. So even if we gave up 2 of the 3 guys who I just mentioned, you still have Tim Tower, who's shown he's talented enough to cover that spot, alongside someone like Jorge Barrosa, who's been up in the majors before. And that's even without considering the conversations that were had about A, moving Blaze Alexander there in the spring, or B, the kind of top outfield prospects like Slade Caldwell or Ryan Waldschmidt being hot on the docket. The D-backs are never breaking the accusations of only ever trying to get speedy, small outfielders. And I know Corbin Carroll has worked out, it remains to be seen whether Caldwell or Waldschmidt will be quite as good. Despite the division looking stronger and stronger and more of a challenge by the day, especially with the Devers trade, I feel we might get one final push out of this roster before the rebuild that we all know is coming next year. We are definitely not out of the woods yet, and the upcoming games in Toronto represent a good litmus test of whether this team can capitalize on the last 2 series wins to gain some ground, but the gap isn't looking as completely insurmountable as it has done at previous points of the season. We are currently, yes, still 7 games back out of first in the division, but we are above 500 for the first time in a little while with a 36-35 record. Padres above us, they're 39-32, and we just took a series from them. Then it's actually fairly close between San Francisco and the Dodgers. They just split a series, and then the wild card mix is looking a little bit more difficult in a couple of cases. We're 3 games back out of a wild card spot, but we're also now 4 teams back with St. Louis kind of jumping above us recently. So the Diamondbacks currently have a percentage of 507, where St. Louis have a 514. The same goes for Cincinnati, who are at 514, before Milwaukee is the first team outside of a wild card spot at 534. And then San Diego, San Francisco, and Philadelphia currently represent the 3 wild card spots, with the division leaders, the Mets, the Cubs, and the Dodgers, being in the guaranteed spot. But we have a little bit of a cushion then back to Atlanta in the wildcard race, who are 5 wins behind us, Washington 6 wins behind us, and then Miami 8 wins behind us. So it's all an upward climb, but it's an upward climb that I think is pretty doable if you look at how things are going at the moment. Currently, Toronto, who are our next victims / opponents, are 38 and 33 with a 535 percentage, and they're on a losing streak. They've lost their last 3, so yeah, they may be looking to make a statement, take on the Diamondbacks, play well there. Game gets started tomorrow night with Fart on the mound going up against Chris Bassett. Fart's got an 8-4 record with a 5.50 ERA and put that really rocky 10-run 1-inning start behind him in his last game against the Padres. Following on from that, we are likely to see Eduardo Rodriguez in the game afterwards, which means that the bottom of the rotation spot will be filled probably by Ryan Nelson coming up and taking on Kevin Gausman in the final game of that little series. I think those so far are pitching matchups that certainly the Diamondbacks starters have a chance of winning. Like Ryan Nelson has definitely not looked, as wildly unpredictable as he was last year in the starting rotation. And yeah, I think that's probably where he's going to have a future. If he has a future at the Diamondbacks long term, it will be as a starter. We have no shortage of solid long relief guys when Christian Maynor comes back off of the injury list. So yeah, Ryan Nelson, like I said earlier, we're going to have a very young starting rotation going into next year if we're losing Gallen or Kelly. Merrill Kelly, of course, 36 years of age, is our best pitcher this year. So if we're going to prioritize renewing 1 or 2 of those guys, I would like it probably to be Merrill. I think I've already done several episodes on, are we going to trade Zach Gallen? Where might he go? He's already said he's going to go to the people that offer him the most money instead of the team that he most wants to go to. He had that amazing start, 2 starts actually, one in New York, one across the bridge, also in New York at the Yankees and the Mets. So yeah, and we said it at the time. We said, yeah, Zach Gallen just auditioned for the Yankees. So yeah, it'll be tough to lose him, but I think we're all braced for that already. There's plenty of other names perhaps floating around in the mix that the Diamondbacks could go looking after. I've seen on social media, I've seen the likes of Kyle Finnegan, Mitch Keller, Ryan O'Hearn, Louis Robert Jr., all mentioned as potential targets there. O'Hearn, of course, we talked about as potentially on the chopping block over at the Orioles. Luis Robert Jr., he's on the White Sox, so White Sox obviously in the midst of a big rebuild after such a disastrous year last year, so perhaps some prospects could go that way. I don't particularly want to say let's give up Jordan Lawler, but I've not sold on Jordan Lawler at all yet. Like, I've never seen, at least in my time following baseball, somebody who is so good at AAA level and yet has struggled so much in the moment they came up to the majors. So yeah, Jordan Lawler I think represents somebody we should probably be getting more comfortable with the idea of cashing in on. I'm not, a big baseball veteran expert, so yeah, I know there's still very much a good chance he could come good and develop, and he just needs more time. But the amount of hype that's been floating around him versus the lack of delivery means, yeah, Lawler should be somebody we should be looking at potentially trading. One of the replies to the tweet I was looking at when it comes with this list says Finnegan and Chafin, please. So yeah, maybe a return for Andrew Chafin to the Diamondbacks could be in order there. Let's have a look at Finnegan's stats over here. Because in terms of their pitching and stuff, yeah, like Mackenzie Gore is going crazy. But yeah, Carl Finnegan. Let's see here. Yeah, 2025 regular season, 26 games, an 0-2 record, a 3.12 ERA over 26 innings pitched, and 21 strikeouts. Yeah, so could be an interesting option for relief in this case. Has been in Washington pretty much his entire career, right? Yeah. He's got some solid save records in places too. So, yeah, I definitely wouldn't say no to that. He's got 18 saves on the year out of 23 save opportunities. Yeah, that's pretty good too. As far as closers go, yeah, he represents a pretty good option there. And age 33 as well, so perhaps could be a closer situation for a few years as opposed to, buying a Kenley Jansen or, a Bautista for 1 or 2 years. You could be looking at, your closer for the next 3, maybe 4, if you're lucky, 5 years if the velocity doesn't drop off the arm too much like it did with Paul Sewald. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good shout too. So just goes to show that, people online, perhaps even more the armchair GMs, know a little bit more about baseball than I do. But hey, if it's not the Diamondbacks, why would I bother watching it? It took quite a lot for me to, watch anything other than a Diamondbacks game when I first got into it. I watch a lot more general baseball now, but for the most part, you'll catch me just like watching games where I know there's an ex-Diamondback playing in it. So that, that's really the only reason I would watch the Yankees is because Paul Goldschmidt is there. It took a lot of effort for me to, get my butt up out of bed despite being super jet lagged and watch that one inning that Ohtani pitched on his return to pitching. Yesterday, I wasn't super invested in that. I was just, far too awake to not be doing something at, 3 in the blooming morning. Thanks, jet lag on that one. But yeah, that's kind of the regular experience of being a baseball fan in the UK anyway. There's quite a lot of first pitches, especially for someone like me who follows a West Coast team where, 3 a.m. is first pitch time. Shout out to Justin Martinez Enthusiast on social media as well, who I know shares that exact experience doing all of that for Diamondbacks baseball. But hey, at the same time, this also includes, wild 9th inning, 7-run comebacks and Geraldo Perdomo clutch triples and things with the bases loaded. There's ups and there's downs of being a Diamondbacks fan, but I like to focus on the ups because that's just sort of who I am. I'm a positive guy. And I think that's a good note to wrap it up on. I want to say thank you very much to everybody for listening. I'd like to give a shout out to the friends of the podcast over at Home Run Travel, who of course facilitated the last 2 weeks of you lot not having to listen to me waffle about Diamondbacks baseball and instead inflicted me on a tour group going around the West Coast baseball scene. The Dodgers, Angels, Padres, Giants, and the Mariners all at home stadium, all in glorious, lovely sunshine. So yeah, thanks again to Home Run Travel. If you're one of my listeners in the UK and you fancy seeing some baseball, there's trips to both the World Baseball Classic next year in Houston that's just been announced, as well as a trip later this year to the East Coast to see a bunch of the best teams in baseball over on that side of the United States. So yeah, go check out Home Run Travel. And of course, remember to subscribe, /follow, /like, /everything else, wherever it is that you're listening to.